how to help run a public company. I helped run earning call sessions, and that really gave me the tool set and the confidence to say, hey, I could be a head of finance of a high growth tech company.
What led you to leave Mongo? It has been a very successful IPO. I think the stock has done tremendously well. The company is doing very well. What led you to say, hey, now I'm ready to take the next step?
And it was not an easy decision because, yes, Mongo was doing well, and I left them at a time when it was going really well, right? The company is growing tremendously, and it was a couple of years after the IPO, and it was growing like a startup.
So I would love to understand a little bit on your move from that medical classes to joining the accounting classes. Was it really the first time that you were exposed to the world of finance?
The theme for me is I just love operations and how the numbers tie back to it, right? That's been the driving force in my career. The tech world is unbelievable because it's things that you just wouldn't have imagined, 15, 20 years ago, some of the tech that's coming out.
Hello. Welcome to the Strategy of Finance podcast, where we celebrate the profession and the professionals in the world of finance. We endeavor to unpack their journeys, to understand what moves them, get inspired by their triumphs, learn from their experiences, and most of all, connect with them at a personal level. In today's episode, I'm excited to have Rakib Azad join us today. Rakib is a finance leader with over 20 years of experience with the last decade in high-growth technology companies. Rakib headed the FP&A team in MongoDB, went public in 2017, then scaled a Web3 security startup, Chainalysis, and is currently serving as CFO at Alkira, a cloud networking company. Throughout his career, Rakib has specialized in tying finance strategy to operations geared towards top and bottom line optimization. During his journey, he has mastered building teams, fundraising, system strategy, and working with C-suite on business transformation. He also enjoys advising startups. Let's end the wait and listen on to learn, grow, and inspire. Hi, Rakib. Welcome to the Strategy of Finance podcast. Really great to have you on.
Hi, Rohit. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Why don't we kick it off with a little background on you? Tell us, how did you foray into this world of finance and became a CFO?
Sure. I mean, I'll go back to my college days. Now, my parents immigrated from Bangladesh in the mid-'70s, so I was born in New York. I thought I was going to be, a doctor, right? I think it's a pretty stereotypical kind of thing, and went to the University of Rochester. And pre-med was just not really for me. I was struggling with some classes. I also, didn't like the sight of blood. so it was something that I just like, hey, I always was good at numbers, right? I did great on the SATs and math, right? But I just wasn't exposed to business or anything like that, right? And as a kid, my dad was a dentist, but I was like, okay, Rochester has a great economics finance program, and I started in sophomore year, and now I was hooked from there. I did really well. I did all my classes, graduated in time in 4 years. Graduated in 2001. Thought I was going to go into iBanking. Like, you have that background. I did a lot of interviews. Unfortunately, couldn't land a role. I got into a couple of advanced stage interviews, and I'm like, what should I do? I still didn't really know this world, right? Because I was like, hey, all I knew was what people talked about was, oh, iBanking's great, and you learn a lot, and I could have a great career and make a lot of money, right? And so I had to go, back to the drawing board and just get advice from, career centers and other folks. And then I was like, I realized, hey, companies need finance professionals. I just actually didn't even realize that was a thing, to be honest, until I really looked into it. And it was still tough sledding to find a job. And what I ended up finding is a financial analyst role within a company called Footstar. And it was actually one of those companies that are big, but you never heard about, right? It was a $2 billion revenue business. They owned all the shoe business in the Kmarts. So if people who know Kmart doesn't exist anymore, but it was a large discount store, Walmart competitor. They ran the shoe stores there. They owned a couple of shoe stores one called Foot Action, which is still around today, but owned by Foot Locker, which was the company I ended up working for. So I had this accidental finance career in retail, specifically sporting goods for a while. I branched out a little bit with consumer products. I actually went to the beauty world with Avon products later, and then couple of other interesting roles. But those were interesting days. I'm a New Yorker. I didn't want to leave, and these are New York-based companies, and got to talk sports, learned a lot. But those are in large companies where I was siloed. I didn't see the whole three statements. I was doing a lot of P&L forecasting. I was under the hood in the businesses, like for Foot Locker, for example. I was talking everything through what all the fixtures in our stores to the gross margins of our Nikes and everything. So it was an awesome experience, but it was me just putting together, doing some forecasting based on feedback, and it was a lot of good grounding when it came to my learning how finance ticks, but I wanted more. And I did work for a company called Havaianas, which is a Brazilian company which creates those flip flops. They're pretty ubiquitous. But there was a startup in North America, opening up the U.S. business, right? And I got to see all three statements, ran financial planning, operational planning, and that really said, like, yeah, this makes sense, right? And but I still was thirsting for something different. And New York City at that time started to develop a tech hub, really, right? It had some fits and start in the early 2000s, but in the mid 2010s, the tech world started to percolate in New York, and I was like, hey, what's going on here? And I decided to make a wholesale change to go towards this tech world. So I started consulting for a couple of companies in the New York tech scene. One was a company called LivePerson, which was one of the few enterprise software companies in New York at the time that was of any substance, and got some great learnings there. And then, yeah, I never looked back. My first full-time role was a company called Ladders. It was a job recruiting company, job we call it recruiting tech. It was made a lot of noise in the early 2000s when it started. LinkedIn came in, maybe disrupted it a little bit, but it was a great first role for me, heading the FP&A team. And that was the role that I started learning what a front end engineer versus a back end engineering was, and how a real product team operates. The different types of way R&D teams work with the agile, Scrum, and all that good stuff. And to me, it was a world that got opened up, and I just continued to do my thing. I was a FP&A operator, really working hard with the folks and understanding the business. But in a little bit of a twist there, I was reporting into a COO. She had a legal background, and she actually moved on back on to corporate legal America, and I got the head of finance nod during that role. And lo and behold, this is 100-person company. Had about three folks in the accounting team, one junior analyst, and now I own the finance function, reporting into the CEO. And it was one that I wasn't striving for. That just happened to be an opportunity I got, and that was the first time I had the comprehensive finance leadership role. And this is around 2014, 2015 or so, and really enjoyed it. It was all about cash management there, because it was a self-funded company. Basically, it was a cash cow subscription product, and we're kind of then taking little shots here and there in terms of what new products could bring more revenue, and it just didn't really work out, right? And so for me, I learned a ton, and I was thinking about it. Hey, I'm starting to see some of these companies out there who are unicorns now in the New York tech scene. And what I saw was a director of FP&A role for MongoDB. And MongoDB was making, and this is late 2015, MongoDB is starting to really get some traction from what I heard. And I was able to land that role. And that really was the transformational role for me. It's one where I went back a little bit to head the FP&A team instead of being a head of finance. That was a very conscious decision I made, because I wanted to join a company that was a little bit more advanced in its product market fit and has a CFO in place I could learn from. And the CFO at the time, and still is the CFO, is Michael Gordon, who had a totally different background than me. He was an investment banker by trade for 20 years, had one CFO role under his belt before he joined MongoDB. And I was like, okay, this is a guy I can learn from. MongoDB has great investors, and I think, hey, they have a technology that could actually advance database, right? So database, usually, I don't want to get too technical, and I'm not technical enough anyway, but relational databases were, the databases are out there, the oracles of the world. And MongoDB was bringing a NoSQL unstructured database to the market, and they're unique because it's open source. And I was like, hey, MongoDB's technology could open up big data applications, so mobile applications that need to serve up big data. MongoDB is there, and that's exactly how it unfolded. And during this time, when I joined, MongoDB was uh, on-prem product, but the genesis of Atlas, the cloud database, came out in 2017, right before we went public, and that's where I just learned a ton, helped scale a cloud-based software business, and we became public. And that gave me a skill set that I didn't have. I learned how to how to help run a public company. I helped run earning call sessions, and that really gave me the tool set and the confidence to say, hey, I could be a head of finance of a high growth tech company. So it's a little bit. It's been quite a journey, and that has put me into a couple of CFO type roles. Right, I went on to a company called Chainalysis, started as a Series B, went to Series F, and now I'm CFO of Alkira, 3 months in. And so, yeah, I'm more than happy to dive into a lot of that. But it's been it's been an interesting journey to get here. I haven't seen too many people just go through the operational ranks to become a CFO, but it's one where it was a unique journey for me that I truly enjoyed.
I think certainly. I don't think there would be many kind of medical students who have ultimately became CFO. So I would love to understand a little bit on your move from that medical classes to joining the econ
Yes.
accounting classes. Was it really the first time that you were exposed to the world of finance, and kind of before that you
Yes.
had never thought of it?
Yes, I didn't take any high school classes. Never had any exposure in any way. Right, all my friends, they were on the science path. To be honest, from high school, and growing up, I grew up with a lot of friends who were parents from Bangladesh, and they were all in this, the medical or pharmaceutical fields, right? So I had no exposure, and so for me, it was something I had to find in myself. And I'm proud of myself for making that move, because I've known people who didn't make that move, right? And I've seen some people roughed it out, became doctors, and they're itching to become business people, right? So and be in finance or something else like that, right? And my parents are very they were the type who were encouraging. After they wanted me to be happy, right? So I was lucky to have parents who were supportive, even though they obviously would love to have seen me become a doctor, because that's just how it is. But they're ahead. It's gonna make you happy, and hopefully, you can have a good career doing it. I don't think they would have ever imagined, the success I've been able to have. And it is, if you do well in this industry here, it could be obviously lucrative, right? So it's something that sometimes these parents who came from immigrated to this country don't know about that world, right? And but for me, it was just a natural thing that happened, and it was organic, right? It was one that I wanted to go to something that I thought I was going to enjoy, and I really enjoyed it, right? And yeah, I did actually tinker with the idea of, do I go into academia? But I'm a more of a applied person. I can't think in abstract really well, right? I'm a very extremely, like, show me something, and I'll apply, and I'm a doer, right? And I love the theme for me is, I just love operations and how the numbers tie back to it, right? That's been the driving force in my career.
Super interesting. I can totally relate to parents being very supportive, especially Asian parents being,
Yeah.
supremely supportive to whatever the kid want to do. Especially, I would imagine, like, once you have done your courses and you were looking for different kind of jobs, and IB specifically, and you weren't able to land it, that must also be an interesting time where, what to do next once I've done this
No,
degree
yeah,
must have been something on
exactly,
your head.
exactly. And my personality is one where I don't stress out too much. I try to keep even keeled, and I had to think logically. What can I do? I'm not the kind of person who bemoans, "Hey, this is happening to me," and woe be me. I do say, "Hey, what is the next step I need to figure out to keep this going?" And so I've had parts of my career that's felt like I'm like on the brink a little bit of what the next step is, and I just have to think, "Hey, what is the best step for me that could give me a fighting shot to create a great career," right? And that's been a theme for me in the last 20 plus years. And but that's something I'm consider myself very resourceful, and I had to do that. Right, I'm not a natural entrepreneur, so starting a business wasn't an option. So that's why we're like, hey, I'll work at a shoe company, right, and do what I got to do, and eventually, I'll get to a place that I'm going to be happy. And like, with, for example, chain analysis is software in the crypto blockchain world, and that crypto didn't exist when I was in college, right? It's so like you never know where your career is going to go. And I love that, right? I'm like this being in the tech world is unbelievable because it's things that you just wouldn't have imagined, 15, 20 years ago, some of the tech that's coming out. And now I'm helping these companies become seminal companies, and it's a great feeling.
Well, we'll certainly dig a lot into Mongo, chain analysis, and Alkira. But before that, I want to understand the difference between projecting, 100,000 shoe pairs being sold versus, you know,
Yes.
creating a financial model where the unit of measurement is perhaps, per gigabyte of pricing.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a different world for sure. It's physical goods versus digitally delivered software, and it's one where have to think in similar ways of crafting it. Right, you have to understand what is that price demand kind of equation, right, based on you know uh, the traction you're getting in the business, right? So with footwear, right, there's a lot of history. That's the main difference, honestly. Here, like, yeah, I'm in Alkira, we're creating a category, right? And so for forecasting, it is much harder, but it's the same idea, right? You want to understand what the art of possible is based on where the market is right now, and then what can we do to invest to sell more, right? And do it in a way that's profitable, or on the path to profitability, if you will, right? And so it's just totally different context, right? Because in the shoe world, you're profitable but barely profitable, but it's all about the cost optimizations, and while still selling what you need to sell to get hit that profit margin. Here, especially when you're in the startup phase, it's you're setting kind of different ground rules and target points with every year. It evolves every year, and so it's hard to really make the direct connection, other than the fact that you want to sell as much as you can while doing it sustainably.
Are there any elements of the retail or physical goods financial planning that you were actually able to brought into the digital financial planning world?
I mean, not necessarily directly. It's just thinking about it the same way, though, right? Because you want your gross margins to be as strong as possible. So, what are the elements that contribute to cost of sales, right? So, I'm having those conversations today, and so when it's in the shoe retail environment, it's all about the physical cost of acquiring the goods, and keeping that lean, right? Negotiating power. Here is similar elements. So, hosting expenses is a huge part of our COGS. There's a negotiation element where you're negotiating with the AWS Azures of the world on getting the best pricing possible. There's ways to keep the capacity down so we don't spend as much on the cloud cost, right? And so the thinking is the same. It's just a completely different context. And but the things that I learned back in my early days is just the grounding of finance and how to run a great P&L, right? And that is something I've taken with me my whole career. You had to be very disciplined on that P&L, and that has given me like kind of that DNA for this world of efficient growth, if you will. And It's been an interesting combination of experiences for me because I also grew up in the tech world of spend to grow as well, right? And how do you combine that? And we're in that world right now, and so I really enjoyed my time in the retail world because it was just something where I brought discipline to the PNL, and now I'm being asked to bring discipline to the PNL in a startup, right? And it's giving me a lot of interesting things to go back to look at and what I thought about that back then, and how do I apply it today.
All right, makes sense. We'll certainly dig a lot into the time at Mongo and the IPO, and kind of how to really orchestrate that from a FP&A perspective. But before going into that, let's just finish kind of the various moves that you have made from the Mongo
Mhm.
to chain analysis and then chain analysis to Alkira. What led you to leave Mongo? It has been a very successful IPO. I think the stock has done tremendously well. The company
Yes.
is doing very well. What led you to say, hey, now I'm ready to take the next step and become a
Sure, and
CFO?
and it was not an easy decision because yes, Mongo was doing well, and I left them at a time when it was going really well. Right, the company is growing tremendously, and it was a couple years after the IPO, and it was growing like a startup, and it was still exciting, and felt the energy every day. But personally, for me, I was the FP&A expert, right, and it's one where I wanted to be that head of finance again, and I could probably stick around for another 5, 10 years and maybe not get that head of finance role. And honestly, building is what excites me, right? So I felt like the work I did with Mongo from the time I joined to the IPO and a few years after, there was a lot of building, and the building was starting to level off. I built a great team; they were doing great work for me in the company, and I felt like, hey, I've I'm in a good place here. I've stabilized the FP&A team, and we are now contributing in all our facets. We created an unbelievable environment where we were, yeah, I wouldn't call it activists, but we were very proactive in being partners to the business. And I was like, I'd love to bring that to a startup again, but this time as at head of finance, and do it, hopefully do it again, right? And build a great company. It was awesome to go through an IPO. Unbelievable feeling to be on the floor of Nasdaq. But I think what really gets me ticking is just building a great business, and that's what really prompted me to find a company where I was like, hey, this could be fun, and I has a chance to be a great company. And chain analysis happened to just being something. It was an inbound opportunity that came to me. I was not a crypto guy per se. I owned a couple coins on crypto on Coinbase, but it was one where I was like, hey, chain analysis is trying to solve what could be a tremendous issue because like crypto is human progress, and they're bringing security, compliance, and analytics to this world, and they're well ahead in this nascent field. And this is before the crypto bull run in 2020. Great investors, benchmark Excel backed them, and I was like, okay, I got along with the founders, and I think this could be interesting. That was really it, and I decided to make the move. Some people in Mongo were like, "Hey, you're leaving us for a crypto company," and I was like, "It's a software company. I think it could be great." And I think people respected the decision. I spoke to the CEO at Mongo about the decision and everything, and he's like, "Hey, you got to go with your gut." And it was I would never have guessed the journey chain analysis that I would have went through in 3.5 years. I joined at 120 people, not not too much cash in the bank at the time actually. And Michael Groniger and I, we hit it off really great, where I really believed in the mission, and we made some critical investments that year one, even before the bull run, because I was like, hey, I learned my lessons from Mongo that we gotta invest, and so more than happy to dive in deeper into that role, but I could also jump into the next move. Up to you how you want to.
Yeah, I would love to hear what kind of investments are you referring to, and
Yes.
why did you feel right now, like what are the elements that you saw in Mongo and said, okay, these are the same kind of leading indicators that I'm
Sure.
seeing here in chain analysis that should warrant a good investment at this point in time.
Great. And I think with Chainalysis and now with Alkira in Mongo, these are picks and shovels companies, right? And they are there regardless of where the world is going, right? They're building the infrastructure required, right, to run other great software. Chainalysis is allowing for the ability to us, the tracing of the movement of Bitcoin and other crypto, and understand where bad actors are there. And this is building planting the seeds for compliance and security that will be required, and so that's what I saw. And it's good to see there's some smart money in there, right? That helped me be more confident about it. But I saw it personally with Michael and Jonathan, the co-founders, their conviction, right, of where the world's going and how chain analysis plays a role. So that gave me the confidence, and so that's been kind of the way I see things when I evaluate opportunities. Like, is this a company that is helping build infrastructure for the new world, if you will, right? that's been the theme for my recent moves, and so it's served me well so far. And as the chain analysis is doing really well and approaching $200 million in ARR, right? It's one where I'm proud I've helped build a company that is now in the Forbes Cloud 100 and CNBC disruptors, and it's a good feeling, right? And so I'm hoping to do that again with Alkira.
You said when you joined chain analysis, there wasn't very much cash in the bank left. And so I would imagine as soon as you joined, you had to hit the road for fundraising.
Exactly. And we did do just an extension of the Series B because this now, mind you, this is 2020 COVID hit, right? And everyone thought the world's going to fall apart. And we wanted to get some cash in the bank. And we did do a raise, a modest raise. We brought in a great investor, Ribbit, at that stage, but it gave us a little bit more confidence, right, to make some bets. And we hired some go-to-market resources, right? So that's where I pay a lot of attention to the go-to-market org and how that needs to evolve, and knowing what chain analysis, the business is, it's a global play, right? And do we have the coverage around the world required to hit the ground and sell? And so that's why we made some bets there that in 2020, and this is before again that bull run that happened. And I was also saying, hey, G&A and R&D, you got to look at those. What are critical roles to make sure we hit the product roadmap delivery, right? So I worked with the head of engineering to ensure that, like, at least can we hire the most critical folks, and then I had to bring in a few key people, right? And I kept it fairly lean. And when I joined, we were in the 20 million ARR range, and uh, I built a small team of 5 folks that we took all the way to 50 million plus. And but you had to hire really good people, right? And so for me, uh, those investments we made were pivotal to get us ready for that bull run that happened, right? And we would never known that, like, the stimulus checks that were being written out prompted this, like, Main Street crypto bull run. And it was great for chain analysis because we were providing the compliance products for private companies, like a Block, right? And while also selling our solutions to the public sector, right, to the FBI's of the world. And so we were ready, since we made those investments, we were ready to meet the moment. And that became a virtuous cycle of just a lot of fundraising. And, we end up raising $470 million in span of 18 months. And we did take advantage of the environment, and, the environment's quite different today. But, one experience I did not have until chain analysis was that investor relations kind of experience, right? And I met over 100 investors in my time there, and I loved it. I loved meeting different investors with different theses, how they thought about the world, and I learned a lot. And now, I have folks I could reach out to at any given time, and and catch up and talk about the state of the world, which is quite different today when it comes to venture funding. But it is what it is.
Very cool. Now let's talk about your move to Alkira. What led you to then move on from chain analysis, which is certainly continuing to
Yes.
do very well, to another exciting company?
Yes, I think now the theme is, and I already alluded to this. I didn't had to get to the IPO stage to feel like this is a job well done. I helped build a tremendous team. My team was around 30 plus people by the time I left, and it was one where, yeah, really great folks in the team who could run the business. And we got to a point where now it's like, hey, you're starting to build those little things to get ready to become a public company. And the build, a lot of the interesting build parts were done, right, in the review mirror. And I think with the IPO market also being on the downside right now, it was hard to see what the horizon looked like in terms of that timing as well. And so for me, I was like, hey, what would I rather do? Do this where I'm starting to just tinker and make sure the company's in a great health, or can I build another great company? That's quite frankly the question I asked myself, and I felt like I gave it my all here, 3.5 years in, and I'd love to do it again. And so I networked with some VC talent arms, and the Kleiner Perkins team introduced me to Alkira. And I met a decent amount of companies in this past year, to be honest, right? Just meet and greet, and I really hit it off with the team. But it was a mutual interest because this is infrastructure SaaS play, right? It's creating for me. It's taking an established technology and bringing it to the new world, right? It's we're delivering a networking solution via the public cloud, and this harkens back to my MongoDB days. We were the first database in the world to deliver a database via the public cloud, right? And this is Alkira is the first company in the world to deliver a turnkey end-to-end solution via the public cloud, uh, and for me, it made a lot of sense. It made too much sense for me not to take it, right? It's like it's so yeah, here I am, and I'm very excited, right? Because I think we have potential to build a seminal company.
Very cool. So you have been now to three different infrastructure software companies.
Yes.
Um, why don't we maybe spend a few minutes just riffing about that space in general? It
Sure.
certainly seems like something that is much more mission critical.
Hmm.
And in this kind of an environment where many of the apps are being cut, certainly people can't just cut out infra software. So,
Exactly.
in your experience, as you have seen at least the last, I would say, 7, 8 years of journey in infra software, can you give maybe your three big takeaways on the space very broadly, and then maybe we pick a few specific items that we would dig into?
Sure. I mean, in the new age infrastructure software companies, it's all about that consumption delivery, right? And especially now via the cloud when it makes sense, right? And it's a classic land and expand. So where you land the logo, but the usage dictates where the customer ends up going, right? And so it's a win-win, I think, for both sides, because the customer uses what they need, and for the software company, they're able to land different types of use cases, right? So for Mongo and Alkira particularly, it's different use cases using our technology. And so you can land on one use case and get that land in, and then boom, you're in. And then you have a infrastructure behind you with sales folks and customer success and solution engineers to make sure you succeed in that use case. And then other use cases could come on organically. Sometimes you could land multiple use cases right off the bat, right? So it's one where it just it just makes sense, right, in terms of how to go to market and how it fits the needs of a customer. With the yeah, and it's very sticky, and so that's another kind of thing I'm seeing. It's very sticky because it's a hard buy at first because it is transformational, right? Your database is a very tough transformation. Networking transformation is very tough. So the logo land is tough. So that's been a theme I'm seeing. But then the economics are tremendous. So it's a high cost to acquire, but the LTV gets delivered in spades once you have the right solution. So that's really been the thematic kind of things I've been seeing that just shows the strength of a business when you hit that product market fit, right? That's obviously the first key point, and and I think it becomes a now so sticky that it's all about just making sure the customer's satisfied, and you're ensuring that, right? So there's some costs that need to go in to ensure that ongoing satisfaction. But it just once you have the product market fit, it's a great business to be in.
Hey, so that makes a lot of sense. Why don't we dig a little bit into the pricing side of infra software? Maybe start with if there are any significant similarities
Mhm.
or differences that you have seen across these three companies.
Sure. All have usage-based components to it, right? So it's one where we're delivering, and you measure it by the units delivered. And Mongo and Alkira's situations, they're both like data that's being transmitted, right? You're charging from a gigabyte perspective, right? And with Alkira, there's sizing too. There's like T-shirt sizing with the gigabytes being moved over exchange points, if you will, right? And it's one where consumption based pricing is accepted by a lot of customers, but in both cases, Mongo and Alkira, some customers want the certainty. So there was times where we had to come up with fixed pricing commensurate to how we think the consumption is going to play out, right? And so we're going through that right now at Alkira. It is a little challenge where we do have customers who are pay as you go. You have customers who are consumption commit, so they commit to a certain amount of consumption, so we have certainty on both sides on what we're going to get. And then we also have a fixed model where we're just giving a fixed price. And right now, that obviously made me nervous as a finance leader, and I had to dive in. And right now, it's it seems like it's a profitable business, and we got to make sure that's the case. All right, and that's where the pricing becomes key, right? Because we got to look at the cost components, how the customers are using our product, and then build a pricing that makes sense, whether it be consumption or we convert it to a fixed price. And we do want to be very flexible when it comes to our customers and what they want. And so that's something, it's going to be one of the bigger challenges that I'll undertake here at Alkira. Uh, but when it comes to pricing power, it should be no different than any software company where there's obviously things like inflation happening, and you have to the more sticky our product gets and more market share we have, you have pricing power that gets built, right? So I was able to see that in Mongo and a little bit in chain analysis. Chain analysis, we built it. We have a compliance product that was transaction based. So every time a crypto transaction is made, they look at our software to see, hey, is this a red flag associated to this crypto? So we built a model around that, and it was a tiered pricing. So if you get to a certain amount of volume, you unlock discounting, right? And so that it became that model where the more you use the software, the better pricing you get on a unit economic basis, and it becomes a win-win where we're getting more volume. And there, I instituted the ability to upgrade to a new tier where you commit to the dollars, and then you get even better pricing, right? So it's one where we did a little bit of that in MongoDB as well, because at the end of the day, you also want some certainty while giving your customers flexibility. So that's the theme: is how do you traverse that, right? Because I as a finance leader, want that ARR certainty, but I want my customers to be happy as well, right? And so there are permutations you got to look at to get to a good place. And so sometimes it's great when a customer says, "Hey, I need certainty on my expenses," because that for them it's an OpEx. For me, it's the ARR, and we can meet together on a model that makes sense. But we do have like the unit kind of pricing of by gigabyte is like the building blocks, right? And then you kind of have to build it in a way that that makes sense for the company and for the customer.
I'm sure you like kind of this the predictability of the ARR, but I'm pretty sure that your salespeople would
Yes.
love that even more. I'm curious to understand, how do you incentivize sales
Yes.
in this kind of a model where they may not know if the ARR that they're getting from this customer is going to be 1 million
Mm-hmm.
or 500,000 or 5 million?
Sure. And yeah, that's a hot topic right now as we go into the next year. And for the pay as you go, right? So some customers want pay as you go. I am talking through with our head of sales and CEO that let's measure every quarter for the first year, right? And so month 3, what is the annualized number? And it's an interesting one, right? Because it'll keep an executive tied to the business, whether it's good or bad, right? Because one of the things we're going to do is if it dips below the previous quarter, it might go against your quota attainment, for example, right? So it's going to be an interesting kind of thing to analyze as time goes. But I am open to doing that. That we don't have this in place right now. So like every quarter, let's see what that annualized revenue looks like, and I'm willing to pay on the spread. And that will, yeah, I think that should work well mutually. And then we'll see if the salespeople rather have do the fixed pricing and get that that check the front end. I'll be happy as long as we build profitable deals to do that, right? So we want to set up a commission plan that is fair, but one that guides towards the best outcomes, which is like I want more certainty. So I want the customers to have flexibility. So consumption commit, for example, is a great one, right? Because you have that commitment in place, and the dollars are going to come in, and let the customer use as they please during that year. But it's a use it or lose it, right? Because then you have revenue recognition issues if you're letting them roll over after the year, right? So that's one of those things I've already made sure people are aware. Like, you rolling over the commitment is not going to work, right? And so it's like, how do we just make sure we have the guardrails in place?
At your time at chain analysis, were there any specific traits that you were able to pick which worked very well in your team versus that didn't go so well for whatever reason?
So I like to have a diversity of thought and experiences and even personalities. So I'll be honest, like there's certain traits I look for, but then there's other roles that don't require those traits. So I'm not looking for the same trait throughout the finance org. But so somebody who's on the FP&A team, they have to be able to talk to stakeholders, right? I mean, and have meaningful strategic conversations. You can't just be technically proficient and be successful FP&A person, for example. But accounting, the best accountants I do think have that same quality to be. I mean, but you could be a really great accountant and just be technical, and that fits the need, right, of the team, and I'm fine with that because we need it, right. And so I'm open minded to when it comes to the folks we bring in, and but if there's a misfit in terms of what I'm expecting from that role versus what they're bringing, then you have to think about change. I don't like to get there, so that's why I do put a lot of emphasis in the that fit aspect in the interviews. But I love to have a well-rounded team because I think that's you get the best work from the some of the parts who are really different, right? And if you have a bunch of folks who just have the same traits, then you actually may not get the results that you thought you were going to get. At least that's been my viewpoint in these past 5+ years when I've been building these teams.
You, of course, are based out of New York, and all kinds of talent
Yes.
are available in the city, I would imagine. When you actually go and build a team, do you specifically want to solve for diversity, or it happens naturally if you're looking for
Yeah.
the right kind of
No,
traits?
it's a good question. It's one where you want to hire the best people, and New York does lean towards naturally building a very diverse team. So I've been chain analysis and MongoDB. My team's been incredibly diverse on the classic measures, if you will. But it's some of it. It was just it just happened to be like right, and you're not like overly chasing that, right? And but yeah, I do when it comes to pipeline creation for candidates, if there's no females on the pipeline, I'm like, hey, what's going on here, right? Because I do want to make sure we have a healthy, funnel that's bringing folks from all backgrounds. And then you really want to pick the best person for the role. But if you take that approach where you are encouraging some effort to bring in a wide pipeline, it naturally then becomes a diverse team. And so that's something that I do think is important. But for me, the diversity goes beyond your classic measures, right? It's like, hey, even how you grew up, different socioeconomic backgrounds, I think is interesting, right? And so it's one where people learn from each other and respect differences, and you embrace the differences, and that creates, I think, a bond that is better than when you have folks maybe coming from the same background, right? And so that's something I take pride in, and when building teams. So something I'm going to continue to do, right, and making sure that we are interviewing folks that could may not look traditional on paper, but could end up being a great employee, and you just give them the same shot as everyone, and then you'll see how it turns out.
Makes sense. You talked about few of the roles that only make sense when you are approaching an IPO.
Hmm.
When should the company really make that kind of investment in advance of an IPO? Is it a year in advance, couple year in advance, maybe six
Yeah,
months in advance? How much time do you
yeah,
want to
good
give
question.
them at the company?
Yeah, and you have to almost create a matrix of the roles you need versus maybe a horizon to an exit. And so, for example, what are the roles that are you don't need really in the early days, but helps you become a better company regardless of you going IPO or not, right? And you kind of and that's that next layer of like this is just helps us scale and build a great company. We still don't know if it's an IPO, are we are going to exit if you just stay private, but like how to build a great company, and you kind of look at that, and that's where you start building in that business partnership FP&A. So you have folks who are dedicated to R&D, or folks dedicated to sales, and then you're building muscles there to just really take it to the next level. Then same thing in accounting. There's levels of folks you need to hire just to scale the company. So that's that first tranche, and that if you look back to my MongoDB experience, that already starts happening. Like we went public less than 2 years, after I joined. You're already doing that when I joined, right? You had to start because we made. I think the board gave the go ahead to the management to push towards an IPO by late 2017. And so I just joined, and we were already thinking about that while having a lot of startup pains. But if you're able to do it in a way that's more systematic, I would say you start hiring this next tranche 3 years ahead of even IPO, right? So then when you get to, hey, the decision's made that we're definitely on that IPO path, but we're still 2 years out. You start bringing in like that level of technical help, right? Like that technical accounting leader, not necessarily the SEC expert, right? But the person who understands, like, hey, you get the quarterization, helps us pass a PCAOB audit, right? Like that's where you start doing that 2 years ahead, right? And so you bring that next tranche of folks who are now like, hey, this is the precursor elements, and then yeah, it's 1 year and less is when you bring that internal audit, the SEC folks, think about that head of IR if you think it makes sense, right, based on your current setup, right? Because sometimes you even get by just having great third party IR, right, for example. So, but that's when the 6 months to a year is when you bring that last group who are really truly specific to being a public company, and everything checks out from a metrics perspective, right? In MongoDB, we were looking at all types of metrics to help us ensure that yes, it makes sense for us to go IPO. And then you start thinking about hiring those folks, right? Because what if you just pull that thing and then you have folks who are idle for another 6 months, a year, or even longer, right? And so you want to make sure that timing is pretty rock solid when you bring that last group in.
Makes sense. Let's talk about systems and processes as well, right? We've talked about people. When is the right time to bring in, more automation, more systems, more processes? You've worked at, again,
Yes.
pretty sort of relatively early stage companies and kind of
Yes.
scale them. What have you seen? What is the
It's
gold
never
standard from your
too.
perspective?
Yeah, exactly. And it's never too early, so in my opinion. So I am right now doing a lot of due diligence on systems and processes, and I'm building a roadmap on what the right permutation is of different things to bring into for automation. And you start at the basics, right? We do have NetSuite and Salesforce in place, but they're not connected together right now, right? So that is one of the first things I'll be attacking, and that was the first thing I did in chain analysis. So I was lucky. This is a great time to join where you have the big guys already in Salesforce and NetSuite, because those are the ones that that's one of the few that I agree that should be in, and it's no questions asked right now. And now it's a connectivity and running your processes, right? Your order to cash, and you're kind of like in other things that in terms of building that interconnectivity when you have data coming from Salesforce into NetSuite. So that's something we're attacking pretty quickly. I'm already working with the team on getting that in place. And we're in a world where with the SaaS consumption billing, there are new tools out there that are helping automate that in a way that isn't there in the current stack. And so those are things you have to do, because it's for me, like if you have leaky buckets, you're not gonna have cash conversion cycle at the place where you need to be, where cash is king. So you got to start bringing in the process systems ASAP. This is the time we're global. We're going to be a global company. We're going to be selling everywhere. So I want a robust travel and expense platform, right? And so bring your own travel is going to be obsolete pretty soon, right? And so I'm looking at every process, procurement, P2P. There's a lot of tools out there right now, and I want to bring in a light, robust process on the front end, because I don't want to be overly bureaucratic here, but we're running a procurement process where the back end is has the guardrails that we could pass an audit with, that we are doing the right things, right? And so that's so I'm enjoying right now actually doing just meeting a lot of software companies. Some I've heard of, some are who are new, and I'm going to try to stack up processes and systems that are automated wherever I can, again without being uh, intrusive to the business, right? That's like I'm very mindful to that, and there's been some missteps in I've seen in the past when it comes to that, right? And I want to avoid making those errors where our employees are like, hey, this is creating work for me, right? You want processes and automations that actually make people's lives easier while also building the back end guardrails and compliance that are required. And I'd love to get that stuff, completely in a great place this next 12 months. When I'm saying all that stuff, I'm talking about the core, the OTC, the P2P, the FP&A tool, right? And we have a game plan where every major process is systematized with the best tools.
It's interesting when you said that both at Chain Analysis and Alkira, you have found Salesforce and NetSuite already present.
Yes.
10 years back, when I used to do banking in the Valley, NetSuite, people would only start thinking about making that investment once they are past 50, 60 million in
Yes.
revenue, right?
Yes.
And so just having that dramatic change where now people are deploying that way early in the
Yes.
cycle, it's like that just talks about the maturity of some of these companies and how they think about scaling.
No, no, exactly, and then so it makes I think everyone's lives easier, right? On the scaling perspective. So right now it's all about then optimizations on these tools because they're very powerful tools, but they need customizations to the business, and so that's where we are right now. Because then it's a lost investment if you're not starting to customize to your specifics of your business, and then your what does that ecosystem around NetSuite and Salesforce also look like? And there's going to be on the sales analytics front, we're talking something like a Clary, right? And then so that could help turbocharge insights into the pipeline of the business, and we've had success using that in past my past experiences. And then I also want to see from an FP&A perspective, there's old guard, but what's the new guard doing, and what can it solve some of the issues I've seen in the past that haven't been solved, right? And so that's where once you have the foundation and you can start thinking about these things. So that's why I was thrilled that we had that because I could now actually think about that next stage. And it's and the connectivity tools are much better today, right? And like the Workados of the world versus in the back in the day, you needed a full engineering resource to do APIs. Right now, you have APIs that could be created pretty robustly just using a. I mean, I could potentially learn like the formulas, right, to disconnect the system. So come a long way in that world, and so that allows you to turbocharge that foundational process design and automating things.
Very cool. Let's talk about your time at Mongo and sort of from an FP&A perspective, how to really go through the process of an IPO.
Mm-hmm.
You can dumb it down and be very tactical in terms of this is
Sure.
step A, this is step B. It's more like a masterclass in terms of FP&A, in terms of like going through an IPO from an FP&A standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. From an FPM perspective, we have a unique seat in there because we're both actually in the back end working with the accounting team on like just the nuts and bolts where it comes to variance analysis, because you're supposed to obviously have your Q quarter over quarter, year over year variances that are then produced in your reporting. So that's like setting that infrastructure and working with the accounting team was a big workflow, right? In terms of we're actually educating the accounting team a lot on the variances. They eventually actually take over the verbiage that goes with the variances, and so that was a lot of handholding to be quite honest on like because they a lot of times the accounting folks are closing the books, they don't actually see what's going the underlying drivers. And so that was a lot of that work that happened behind the scenes where I'm sitting with accounting and going over the variances and hey, T&E is up because this we hired X many people now internationally, and T&E is up, right? And we're going line by line. So that's just infrastructure building and education happening behind the scenes. Then we had the front end seat where we're helping with the company deck, right? And because a lot of this is analytics, SaaS metrics, and so we're helping build the company deck, the roadshow deck. And so that's another area. But I had a unique part of the process where the CFO tasked me to own our kind of red, yellow, green sheet versus when looking at different areas, whether governance, systems, in terms of board composition and everything. Like, and we're kind of looking through. Hey, where are we? Are we yellow because we have X, Y, Z done? We still need to do this, and we reviewed it every 2 weeks. That's the CFO leadership, right? And so I got to have a finger on the pulse, working on that, right? And allowed me to, work with different folks throughout the org. And so, for example, systems. That's one area. Is like, what's in scope or not, right? Within terms of producing data that will go on to your S1 and Q reporting, what should be in scope, what should we take out of scope, right? And so these are just really nuts and bolts stuff that I got to get exposure to and help out. And so then, FP&A, we needed a good enterprise system, so we did go with Adaptive, which is owned by Workday today, and it's one where I'm not, it's one I'll evaluate again if it's the right tool or not. But there's new tools out there now. But that was the tool that was well accepted as an FP&A tool to produce your forecast. The version controls are robust, and that's what I think was most important, right? And a lot of that will inform our variance reporting, and so making sure that it was all in order. And so that was all the back end stuff, and the front end, going back to the company deck, and then also starting to forecast what a Wall Street model looks like, right? And what does a beat and raise look like with our internal forecasts? So that's where FP&A really was. Obviously, that's we're at the center of that, because we had to build that internal reporting. I'm the guy, I had a great person who was doing a lot of the modeling. I was the guy talking to all the stakeholders and really making sure we got this 3-year view down as strong as possible from an internal perspective. Then so we could then come back and create what a beat and raise model could look like, because we want to make sure that, hey, do we have this right runway to do that, right, and be successful. And so we FP&A we had to make sure we get that internal forecast rock solid, right? And that's your bread and butter FP&A. It doesn't matter if you're going public or not. You want to be as accurate as possible, but just held the stakes were higher to ensure that you were not you had the best middle of the road forecast, so you could then build that Wall Street model, help the analysts build the Wall Street model, right? And then we weren't just involved in all the nooks and crannies of what was needed for the S1 drafting. I got to sit in those S1 drafting sessions, got to sit in the banking bake-off sessions, and I was there fly on the wall, but just then absorbing and then regurgitating that, making sure I'm then taking that back to how we think about our forecasting and what's important to investors, right? So that really changed orientation of how I thought about some things, where what is important to investors is obviously what's going to help our share price, and what can I do to help optimize our P&L via that. Some of it's business operations. Some of it, honestly, is sleight of hand accounting that's still within GAAP standards. It just changed that mentality, and making sure our P&L is optimized for the business, right? And you start thinking about things like G&A allocations. For example, in the early days, you put stuff into G&A, you don't think about it, right? And you put all your rent into G&A, but once you go to spending more on G&A is not going to win you a share price. And so the real, you should be allocating that, right? You should be allocating it based on usage. And what are other things that are based on usage by folks, and you could allocate by headcount, right? Those are the things that start happening during that run up to the IPO, right? And I enjoyed that. That actually spoke to my strengths, where it's almost like it's a puzzle out there, and how do you build that puzzle in the best way possible? So that really galvanized me during that time. Is like, how do we deliver a P&L that's going to actually show what the investors want to see, right? So it's So I know I covered a lot there, but in a nutshell, if you are an FP&A team that is very proactive in the business, you're going to be everywhere in the IPO process, not just that front end forecasting, but you might be involved in the systems stuff. You might also help spearhead the tracking of the different workflows, and you're working on accounting to educate them. So it was an interesting experience, to say the least. And I'm proud of where the company's success. We had a good debut. This is before the cloud craziness, and so it was a muted debut, but the company is doing tremendously. And I look back fondly that I was able to help that foundation building for where it is today.
Makes a ton of sense. Whenever I look at financial planning for a software company, it always feels like the expense side is relatively way easier to forecast compared to the revenue side.
Yes.
Especially when you think about, getting a revenue forecast from your sales team, which at times could be super like motivated to put a very high number, or on other times can kind of sandbag it.
Yeah.
How, as a FP&A lead, you take that into account, but then, of course, put your view on top of it and come up with a forecast which would have the least kind of margin of error, or the tracking error, if you will, compared to the actuals that might end up happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is software revenue forecasting is a challenge, right? Because I think we alluded to it earlier, right? It's like you're in an evolving space, and the demand is is dynamic. So for me, the classic things in sales software is there's a capacity component, right? And so if you want to hire X Y Z, right? There's a productivity that's you have history on, and you can do some trend analysis too, but productivity after a while per rep starts becoming pretty standard, right? So by the time my late in my tenure in MongoDB, you have a good beat on your productivity. So that becomes more of a science actually. So like, here, where do you guys think your pipeline is showing that we need to hire? Let's bring the hires in, and then my team is then calculating our expected bookings, and then you go into the CRO conversations, right? You want the CRO to be like, hey, this makes sense or not, because the CRO, you have trust that they are thinking about this holistically, not going to sandbag. But we're building up something that is coming, working with RevOps. Go to CRO, you have those conversations. I'm still looking at independently the pipeline, and I look at historical pipeline, top of the funnel to close, and those dynamics, right? So because you want to make sure you have a healthy pipeline, you have the capacity to deliver it, and then the X factor is like, hey, the execution on the sales to close these things, and that's where you kind of have to put a certain amount of pressure on the org. So you kind of create some choke points over like, hey, you want to hire that many people, this is what I expect, right? And you it's a little bit of sausage making, and then it's something that's it just makes sense, right? To get to triangulate, right? And so in Alkira, it's a challenge because it's early days, and where the market is growing as we speak, right? It's real time growth, and so that this is all about like the art of what's possible. And so I'm looking at the pipeline. I'm looking at like our current capacity. What do we think so now we don't have enough historical trending on productive capacity. What do we think the productive capacity is? And then there's a push and pull. And for me, I get the confidence because like with the pipeline, uh, we have the capacity, and then hearing right now we have really large ticket lands and expand, hearing the stories of what's going on in each of these opportunities, the big ones, and giving me the confidence it's happening, right? And then you kind of build it back into a revenue forecast. But it's tough in the early days, right? But once you get some of the history in, it gets easier, to be honest, right? The consumption piece is where it gets now tricky, right? Because Mongo, we went through this transformation from all ratable licenses to this consumption component. That adds a permutation, right? But we still use that productive capacity as part of it because they're still in charge of selling X amount of dollars, but now it's coming in a different way. But this is where I do think the business analytics and FP&A functions need to work more and with the sales folks and help them see what's going on under the hood. So that is actually a big thing that's on my mind right now is consumption analytics. And we do think there's the billing tool that we're potentially going to bring in uh, is going to help us with analytics to help our salespeople understand how our customers are using it, so then they could forecast the business based on the usage. But it still will plug back to like, what's the pipeline, and I'm going to hold them accountable to put a pin on the number as best as possible as they go along the opportunity, right? So you need the hygiene, real rigor on forecast updating with your opportunities, because that's the only way we're going to then have accurate forecasts, right? Because I need folks who are out there meeting these customers to gauge with every meeting what the latest potential size of this opportunity is, and then you gotta bring it in. And so yeah, I'm not sure. There's no silver bullet, but there is there's a little bit of science and art to this.
All right. Why don't we move to, with all the experience that you've had and all the discussions that we have just had, how would you characterize or define, rather, the role of a modern CFO? What's in your view is a modern CFO?
Yeah, obviously you want that you're the guy who knows numbers and you have the foundation of understanding how P&L and everything works, but now you are that strategic business partner with that acumen, right? And so that's why I'm at the seat of the table in leadership, where I'm going to talk strategy. I will talk through investments that I think make sense. I'm going to be not shy about saying this is what I'm seeing and what I think could be helpful, right? And sometimes maybe people could even forget I'm the finance leader, right? I think that's like I think the modern CFO is somebody who is desired from stakeholders to be a thought partner, right? Because they view them as like that independent thought partner who has obviously privy to all the numbers, and and it's a safe space to chat. But I'm going to be a guy who's going to have be empathetic and also hold you accountable, right? So that's what I pride myself on. I think the modern CFO needs to have those two aspects to them, because and that has served me well, because I go to great lengths to understand that part of the business of a leader and the folks underneath the leader, because I love meeting folks throughout an organization. Regardless of where they sit, and being then understanding the business, being empathizing with their challenges, uh, but then helping inform them about the bigger picture, right? And so I think it's up to that modern CFO to deliver the company's strategy in a way that's digestible for each of the leaders, and then we're all rowing towards the same goal. And I'm going to help you make some tough decisions, but there are going to be some tough decisions, right? And I'm going to use my finance acumen to get there, but and that's obviously that's respected. And but I also want to be one who's going to be also be an ally for you if I do think your investment is going to be the right one. So so that I'm that admin person who will actually ask to spend more sometimes, right? And that's I think the strategic CFO has to do that, right? Because they have to put be able to put a stake in the ground and say, hey, this is something we have to do because of X, Y, Z. And I don't think that was really something that happened, in the past. It's happening much more frequency when I meet other folks, other heads of finances. But like having that real seat in the table is going to be earned through that empathy and accountability.
Very cool. How do you define a successful career?
Yeah, I mean, it's you have your classic things, or your title and your and how much money you make, but that's I'm very happy in that regards. But it's one where I want to feel good that I helped build great companies. I think this is the theme I've already set here, but it's such a great feeling, and I'm grateful I've been in the position to be building companies that no one's heard of when you join them, and they're now household names in the tech world, right? And it's such a great feeling to contribute to that. And you say, hey, we're the unsung heroes, and yeah, I think finance and FP&A folks and are unsung because there's stuff that we do that helps bring that inflection curve, right? And I don't need to have the like, hey, we keep it XYZ and it's out in the world, but it's a personal satisfaction, right? That I'm able to help with that inflection point, because product market fit will only get you so far, right? And so for me, being that finance leader who helps galvanize and does my part to build that great company, is got me to a great place where I'll be, I'll look back and say, hey, I'm very happy I went on this path, right? And while it's great to be, say iBanking and consulting, those are great careers, but helping build, I think I'm glad I've been on this journey, right? And yeah, so I think that's my definition. But yeah.
What would you advise your younger self when you were just graduating with all this
Yeah,
knowledge? What would you say?
I mean, I was a little bit more impatient in the early days, so I did jump around jobs a little bit quicker than maybe what I should have, and I would have told myself, "Hey, like the more you put your effort in and learn more, the better your future self is gonna be." Yeah, I still came to a good place, but I was looking back, I was like, "Why was I so just like itching to do something different?" Right? And and not really diving in and going deep. All right, so that would be one of the things that more patience, go deeper, and that is better for you, right? So the older self saying, hey, it's okay to be slogging a little bit right now because you're learning good things, and so that'd be one thing. Yeah, I think that's the main thing.
CFO job is certainly a very challenging one. What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? I like different challenges, right? So that's why I'm naturally so the modern CFO that I explained has different challenges and new permutations. I'm not somebody who just likes to repeat, rinse, and repeat, and so that keeps me going because there's a new challenge that pops up, especially in this stage of growth, right, where you're trying to build that foundation, and whether it be systems and analytics and you're hitting the ground running in so many aspects, so that I still have the energy for it. So hopefully let's see how much more I have in me, but I still have that desire to work on different challenges every day. And being a CFO at a growing tech company, you have your endless amount of challenges.
Makes sense. Why don't we now move to our lightning round? That's kind of the last segment of the podcast. Should be fun. All it requires is me asking some quick questions and you giving impromptu answers. You ready?
Okay, sure.
All right, let's start with easier ones. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Books or podcasts?
I'd go books.
Thinker or doer?
That's a tough one. I'd like to say I'm 50-50, but I lean a little bit more thinker maybe these days, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Introvert or extrovert?
Mostly introverted.
Scotch or whiskey?
We go with the whiskey there.
How does someone impress you?
So somebody who impresses me is somebody who thinks about challenges holistically, so they see both sides of an issue or a challenge. And I do like having conversations with folks who thinks differently and sees it from a different side. So that's something that I always enjoy seeing when I meet somebody.
What is your one hidden talent?
I could sing good karaoke.
All right. If you can be CFO of any company for a day, which company would you choose?
Oh wow. I don't think I've even had a thought around this, but it would actually be probably in the sports arena because I just am a big in American sports. So I'd say, let's see, I'd probably be CFO for the New York Mets. How about that?
All right. Ideal place to retire.
Interesting. Yeah, one area that I've been actually thinking about was south of Spain. I really loved it when I visited about 10 years ago, and I told my wife that hey, this could be an area that I wouldn't mind at least living part of the year.
All right. If you could teleport yourself right now, where would you go and why?
I think it would be Dhaka, Bangladesh, right? Because I haven't been there in quite a while. It's been almost, quite frankly, almost 20 years actually, and so I still have cousins and other family there. So it'd be nice just to quickly teleport because it's a long trip, and get to say hi. And then one of the things I've been actually doing recently is following the burgeoning tech ecosystem there, right? So I've met some founders over Zoom and calls, and would love to kind of meet some of these folks in person and help advise. And so I could do that quickly and come back.
Very cool. Number one item on your bucket list right now.
One thing on my bucket list is actually I would like to open an eatery in the honor of my mom. My mom unfortunately passed from cancer about 4 years ago, and there are some recipes I actually took from her even before she was sick because I was like, hey, maybe we should open something one day, and that is on my bucket list to actually just try something out, right? And we'll see when we get that done. But I'm very determined that we're going to do something that opened up in our honor.
Very cool. If you could uninvent something, what would it be?
I didn't invent something. Wow. Whew, this is. I'm a fan of my progress, right, in tech, but oh man, ugh, invent. I'm stumped. I'll be honest.
No worries. Who is your role model, personally or professionally? Anyone that you have been inspired by?
Sure. The first place is my dad, right? He was one of the first after Bangladesh. went through a civil war. He was in one of the first classes, dental classes in Bangladesh, and he decided he wanted to have a family in more stable conditions, and he came out here in the country, and he built his way to a dental practice in the South Bronx in the early '80s. The South Bronx at that time, there was no one Native American wanted to be a dentist in that neighborhood, right? And I'm proud of the fact that he built a 30-year plus practice, and I think it's shows the American dream, but he worked his butt off, right, to get make it a good upbringing for us. And so for me, something I look with pride that he was able to accomplish that and allow for my successes.
Very cool. The penultimate question: one thing that can make you 10x more productive.
Well, obviously AI is a hot thing, but for me, I would just love having basically a junior analyst at my disposal at any time, and they're answering like questions that are hidden in the data, right? So because if I could just get real time insights based on the data that's already there, that would just make my life a whole lot easier, right? Because then you could do the proactive partnership with folks because you have the information at your fingertips.
Makes sense. The last one: describe yourself in 3 words.
I say curious, kind, and intelligent.
Very cool. Well, Rakib, this has been an amazing show. Thank you so much for taking all this
Appreciate it.
time. Really appreciate having you on.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. We hope you'll find at least one nugget that is beneficial to you. As always, thanks for listening to Strategy of Finance. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or our website, www.strategyoffinance.com. Your comments will make us better. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and share the word in your network so other people in the finance community can also benefit. Be sure to tune in next week for another engaging conversation. Until then, this is Rohit Agarwal, and remember to learn, grow, and inspire.